Okay. So I'm going to talk today I've titled today's message, The Gift of Prophecy. I love prophecy. I love the prophetic gift. Excuse me. Just get my water. It is a spiritual gift. So it's described in both Ephesians and Corinthians as being one of the gifts that gets given to strengthen, empower, equip, build up the body of believers. But if I'm honest, up until maybe 7 or 8 years ago, I hadn't had much interaction with the prophetic, probably 8 or 9 years ago. And if I'm really honest, I'd say I was probably a bit maybe put out by it, or it was a little bit scary, or a little bit offensive. What's this idea that man could speak on behalf of God? But then I'll share a story in a little bit, but a guy gave me a prophetic word, a guy who I trust, came from South Africa, and that pretty much changed the course of our family's story and kind of our faith journey. So I have a very high regard for the prophetic. I think it's one of the most underutilized resources that the church has. You might have noticed there that Paul says that he hopes that everybody will eagerly desire to prophesy. But anyway, let's get into it. What is prophecy? So if you're playing along at home or you're going to take some notes, I'll have a few questions that you can have answers to today. This is a message that I'd like to give over 5 weeks. I've got a 5-week teaching series that I got to sit under that my pastor in the States did. And so I would love to run that here at some stage, maybe on a weeknight in the new year or something. But I'm trying to condense a really kind of a 5-week message into one, and mindful that our kids are in, so I'm going to do it in 20 minutes, I promise. But just quickly, what is prophecy? It's this idea of foretelling something future, right? So it's foretelling something that's going to happen in the future, and the biblical understanding or the spiritual gift of prophecy is hearing something from God and telling it to God's people. Whether they're in the family yet or not, it's telling it to people who need to hear it. So it's kind of something from the Father's heart for either an individual, a corporate people, or a future event. But it's this idea that we speak on behalf of God to be for the people around us. And in the Old Testament, it functions quite differently in the Old and New Testament. So just a super quick understanding. In the Old Testament, a prophet was a person who would keep checks and balances on the king. The king would govern the people. God's up here. The prophet's over here, kind of in between God and the king to keep checks and balances. And the main emphasis of the prophet was to keep God's people in relationship with him, but there was a huge focus on sin because it was sin that separated man from God. All right? Fast forward to the New Testament. The context changes a little bit. We move from this idea of being a single prophet to Paul saying things like, this is a spiritual gift, everyone can prophesy, but we see a focus change as well. So the intent is still to keep relationship for the people and God together, but the focus changes. It's no longer about sin, because of what Jesus has done, no longer separates us from God if we believe, but the focus changes and it actually becomes about righteousness, identity, purpose, and the plan God has for you in your future. Does that make sense? So in the past, it was about sin separating us from God, and the prophetic had come to say, hey, like let's take the story of Jonah. Jonah was sent to go to Nineveh, and you know the story, went the other way, hopped in a whale for his trouble. But he comes to Nineveh, and the message to Nineveh was, repent or you're going to be smoked. And then they repent. They actually take on board the word of the prophet. They repent, right? And then God changes his heart and mind. And then Jonah gets all depressed, but that's another story. It's a really good story. If you haven't read it, it's a really good story. But in the New Testament, we see, I don't know if you can flick that passage up for me there, Jim, the one from 1 Timothy. We see that when Paul writes to Timothy, he says, mate, you got to hang on to the prophetic words spoken over you and your life. right? So these prophetic words, these are what God has said about you and the ministry God's given you. You've got to hang on to it so that you don't get led astray, so that it may help you to fight well in the Lord's battles. Right? So Tim had been given an assignment. That assignment came. They talk about this elsewhere, that often through the laying on of hands. I'm reading through Acts at the moment, and I'm astounded at how many times they lay hands on people and they prophesy by the Spirit, and then the Spirit tells them what's supposed to happen. Well, we'd assume the same things happened to Tim. Tim has been set apart. The people with the gift of prophecy have prophesied over him. And those words that were spoken over him, he's supposed to cherish, so they hold steadfast amidst the battles, and whatever challenges he's going to face, he's got to hold fast to what the Lord said he needs to do. All right, is that making sense so far? I hope so. All right, so in the New Testament, the aim of prophecy is to help us stay true to the plan and the path that God has for us. So I don't want you to raise your hand. I do questions all the time at Foundo. And I always say to the guys, I don't want you to give an answer. I don't want you to put your hand up if this is true for you. And always somebody puts their hand up or yells out. Anyway, but I wonder for you, just in the quietness of your own heart, have you received a prophetic word? And if you have, what have you done with it? Have you stewarded it? Have you written it down somewhere safe that you could turn back to it? Do you have it buzzing around in the back of your head? All right, I want to ask you the second question. What does the prophetic do? Could we go to verse 3? I think it is. If we could put up verse 3 from 1 Corinthians. There it is. What does it do? Right. The one who prophesies strengthens. Everybody say strengthen. Strengthens others. Encourages. Everyone say encourage. And comforts. Everyone say comfort. Comforts. There's 3 things that we're told the prophetic does. It strengthens, encourages, and comforts. I'm going to show you a little story about my introduction with the prophetic. We're in Tassie at one of our Mighty Men's conferences, and you guys know I got a real heart for men's ministry. I believe you get a man to stand up, you get his whole family to come too. But we were at one of our Tasmanian trips. I don't know who'd come to this one. I don't actually remember. All I know is I got really sick the night before, and I woke up Trev in the middle of the night and said, bro, I need to get to the hospital. Anyway, I had me on a drip for the night, and then we were fine the next morning. But anyway, that's another story again. But we get back to the conference. It was the last day of the conference. It was a Sunday morning, and Mark Porry, a guy who's got an incredible gift. Some of you may remember at the end of that time he was with us, he actually came and did a session when we were still meeting in the little back room out there. Does anybody remember when Mark and his team came along? And they prayed and they prophesied over quite a few of us and they taught. It was brilliant. But anyway, so we're sitting here in that meeting and he calls me out. Have you ever been in a meeting where you've seen somebody called out in the prophetic? I don't think we've done that. Oh, no, we have done that here in my time. Stevie Morrison's done that here. Yeah. Anyway, so he called out a few people, but I was one of them, and it was a really short, simple word. He just said, Steve, I see you as an acorn. You've dropped from the tree and you're laying dormant. Could you just put up at number 3 again? That'd be great. I'm going to give you some context to this prophetic word as we go. I'll tell you the whole lot and then I'll come back. So you're an acorn, you've been dropped from a tree, you're on the ground and you're laying dormant. And then he said to me, now don't worry about your contemporaries who are going on around you. The Lord will take you, he will transplant you into a great oak of righteousness where other people will be fed and find shelter in you. That's what he said. Simple word, pretty short, pretty simple. Now, whenever a prophetic word is given, there's so many different, you might say interpretations or meanings that come to it, but in that moment of the whole word that was shared over me, do you know the one thing that stuck out to me, which encouraged and comforted me, was this idea of my contemporaries. So I'm an acorn, I've fallen from a tree, I'm dormant on the ground, but do not worry. And then he said, your contemporaries are going on around you. The first thought that came to my mind was the Lord highlighted to me how much I compared myself to my mate who I'd just gone through Bible college with, who'd gone off and planted a church and it was thriving. He was doing great. But secretly in my heart, I was constantly comparing myself to this fella. And it was the kindness of the Lord. Marianne Messer prayed that this morning in our prayer time. The kindness of the Lord, just to speak right into the corner of my heart and say, I see you, I know you. The prophetic is so good at strengthening us, encouraging us and comforting us, because there's no one like the Father who sees you, who knows exactly where you are. That's why I love prophetic words so much. Anyway, so that word, 18 months goes down the track. I think it was around about that. And Kirsty had been feeling for about 6 months, God had just been dropping into her spirit that there was going to be a change coming for us. And as you all know, we were pastors here. We shot off to Mexico to spend 3 months with Christian surfers there, and then we travelled through the States. And we thought for sure the Lord was going to pick us up and move us to Mexico. And anyway, it wasn't to be. We were in Mexico for 3 months. We were like, this is not the right spot for us. So we thought the next place we were going to visit a bunch of, quite a few little house churches with Soma, which was a church planting body that I'd become really just familiar with and loved their work. And I thought, Southern California, where else would the Lord want us? We went there, and long and the short of it, it just wasn't what we were supposed to do. We were then heading north to go to see our friends Rob and Suzanne Ecker, who were with us for a few years here. And Rob had been super powerful in my journey. I was a real conservative boy. He'd had some radical encounters with the Lord, and kind of God put us together, and he really just challenged me. He challenged me that there was more from the Lord, and that what we read in the scripture is what's still supposed to happen today. So I'm very thankful for Rob. So we were popping up to see Rob, but I hadn't spoken to Rob in like 6 months. So I called him when we were in San Fran saying, hey mate, we're going to be up your way tomorrow. We're just looking for some Airbnbs, but keen to really hang out. And because it had been 6 months, it was awkward. And he goes, you're not staying in Airbnb, you're going to come stay with us. And I was like, oh, we've got 2 little kids now. And anyway, I couldn't say no. So I was like, that sounds great. The next day he called us when we were on our way up, and he said, oh, your timing's perfect. There's a healing conference going on. You're going to love it, and we're going to go tonight. And I just felt sick in my stomach. Because I hadn't encountered, I guess, that kind of charismatic Christianity that the church that Rob and Suzanne Ecker were a part of. We hadn't really had a lot of encounters ourselves with it, so I was pretty skeptical. Anyway, the very long story short, we went there for 3 days. We ended up staying 5. We had a number of people just come and prophesy over us. People just walk up to you in the middle of the church where you're standing in line getting a coffee. It was quite strange. And a number of prophetic words were seeding us to this idea that maybe the Lord wanted us to move to this church in Northern California. And I remember it was our last day that we were there. I think one of the kids had done a poo, and I remember I was cleaning out the rubbish in the bathroom, and I just felt the Lord just drop back into my spirit the prophetic word of the acorn 18 months prior. And I remember just standing up and looking at the mirror with my hand full of rubbish, and just going, God, is this the place you want to transplant us to? Anyway, I walk outside, I open the front door, and not a word of a lie, there wasn't a single place you could stand on that wasn't covered with acorns on the ground. And I'd never even noticed them. We've been in and out of the house for the last 5 days. I'm like, man, I just wept. I just cried. As I walked around to the bin, I lifted up the bin, I threw the rubbish in the bin, and I knelt down on the ground and I picked up a few acorns, and I've still got them at home today. It's just the kindness of the Lord that he would tell us what's coming, not so that we can go and plan it, right? He doesn't need us to plan it or go and, if he gives you a word that something's going to happen here, it's not for us to go and make that happen. It's not. That's not the point of the prophetic. The prophetic is supposed to remind us that when we get there, God said this would happen, and we can have confidence and assurance that if he called it out, he's going to bring it to pass. That prophetic word gave us the confidence to move to the other side of the world. And those of you that have been with us long enough know that completely changed our family and our lives. But the next question I want to ask you, so I've given you three things. What is prophecy? What does it do? Thirdly, who can do it? Can you go back to verse 1 of 1 Corinthians 14? Let love be your highest goal, but you should also desire the special abilities the Spirit gives, especially the ability to prophesy. And in verse 5 he goes on to say, I wish you could all speak in tongues, but even more, I wish you could all prophesy. Can somebody say, all prophesy? Cool. Guess who all is in this context? Yeah, all. I'm going to talk to you a minute about that. There's three kind of different stages that the Bible talks about in the New Testament about prophecy. But the major one I want to focus on today is that we can all do it. We can all do it. Everyone has the ability to hear what the Lord is saying and then deliver that message to the world around them. So I want to talk to you about three different levels. And I'm really grateful to my pastor, James Heth, who taught me this years ago. It really helped me understand the different kind of stages, not levels, but stages of how the prophetic works. So if you're taking notes, feel free. Number one, there's this idea found in John 10:27 that says, my sheep listen to my voice. That's us, my sheep. If you call Jesus your shepherd, then we're his sheep. My sheep listen to my voice. I know them and they follow me. So all God's sheep hear his voice. That's us. So when Paul says a desire that all will prophesy, that's us. We can all hear. All right? So there's this sense that everybody can hear from the Lord and therefore has the ability to speak and to prophesy over people around us. Now, I'm going to give you some examples soon about how easy this can be, but just track with me for a second. Number two, we read that there is specific gifts that Jesus gives to his church. Right? So 1 Corinthians 12 talks about how we're a body and that we all function differently. There is specific gifts in the prophetic where some people have like a really unique ability to be really good in the prophetic. And actually, our church, we have quite a number of people who are really gifted in the prophetic. And then number three, we have in Ephesians 4 this idea of the office of a prophet. Okay? This is somebody who functions in the prophetic as like one of the five primary gifts: apostle, prophet, teacher, evangelist, teacher, and pastoral. One of the five key giftings that God says this should run the church. So let me give you an analogy of how these things work together. Take AFL. Right? We all had the granny yesterday. I don't care who you wanted to win. Doesn't matter. Geelong didn't play. But here's the deal. How many of you have ever kicked a footy? Put your hand up if you've ever kicked a footy. Nearly everybody. Okay, here's the idea. So, all can prophesy, all can kick a footy. We can all have a go at kicking a footy. Everyone has it within their capability to have a kick. Then we get to level number two. Some people have this unique spiritual gift of prophecy. Well, some people, definitely not me, maybe Izzy, have a unique gift of football, AFL. And some of you may go on to be quite gifted. You might really work at it for quite a period of time, and you might get greater and greater and greater, and you might even play at an AFL level at some stage. Are you with me? So we can all have a kick, but some people have a unique gifting in their life that they will work at and train at and get better and better. That's the spiritual gift of prophecy. Just a little side note, just because God gives us spiritual gifts doesn't mean we should be lazy in them. We have to practice them, we have to grow them, and we have to develop them. That comes when we act on them in faith. All right? We don't get really good at footy by watching TV or watching players. We have to get out on the field and have a go. And then finally, the last one, the office of a prophet, we might look at a coach. So a coach is somebody who they in themselves has functioned at quite a high level of football, but now they've got this unique ability to help other people function in that same role. You over here, you should go and do this. You should have a practice at this. That's the office of a prophet. They can not only do the gift themselves, but their greater role is to actually train and equip, which is why Paul says this is one of the fivefold giftings to help the church function. It's their goal to help train and equip the people in the prophetic. You with me? All can play. Some have a unique gifting. Some are coaches. That's how the prophetic functions. The main one I want to focus on today is this idea of all. We can all do it. And that means you. I don't care who you are, how old, how young. In fact, the church we're at in the States, they have a real emphasis on the kids doing it because the kids don't have the same bad filters that we've got. They just say what they hear. They say what they see. They're incredibly gifted in the prophetic. So parents, if you want to learn, let your kids teach you. All right. Okay, finally. I got 4 minutes. Finally, how do we do it? So if all can do it, how do we do it? Well, I'd say that the first thing I want to say to you there is you've got to be hungry to want to do it. He says eagerly desire. So if you don't want to do it, that's fine, but the church misses out if you don't do it. People miss out if you don't do it. In fact, I was just quickly looking back at my messages, and I hope Glennis won't mind me saying this, but I was looking back at my messages of the last, I think it's been the last 3 weeks. I've had 3 different prophetic words that have been basically 2 lines from Glennis, just very clear, very just precise things, and she often has no idea how powerful they are. That something's going on in my life. God drops this thought of me into Glennis's heart, and Glennis just fires off a quick little text. I just love it. It's so beautiful. How seen, how special, how important do you think I feel to God? It's just super, super powerful. So the reason why I tell you that story is because I just want you to know that it's easier than you think to do this. But if you're not hungry for it, you won't look for it. All right, so here you go. I want to tell you that you need to make space to listen. I'm going to give you 3 real quick little things. You got to make space to listen. You got to quieten out the other noise, and you need to make some space to listen to the Lord. Number 2, you've got to act in faith. How do you know if it's you or from the Lord? You got to act in faith. If you feel like He dropped something into your spirit, that you sense something deep within, you're going to have to move on it. And that's going to be an act of faith because you're going to be scared. You're going to go, is this me? Is this God? Is this the pizza I ate last night? What is it? Number 3, you got to practice. Practice, practice, practice. And what we do when we teach guys at our men's weekends away how to listen or how to be open to the prophetic, we say, imagine your mind is like a blank canvas that you want to give to the Lord. So you just imagine, deep in your mind's eye, you can close your eyes if you want, and you can have practice of it now. And imagine this blank white canvas in front of you, and just say, God, what do you want to put on the canvas? What do you want to paint? What do you want to draw? Is there a movie scene you want me to see? Is there a phrase, a word? Is it a billboard? What is it? Is it a colour? And then we either write down or we put down somewhere what we see. We just let God use the space to do whatever He wants to do. Then we ask Him, who is it for? So often I feel like God just gives me something really tiny just to share. It may be a colour. It may be a little picture, something really small. And then once I start sharing with the person in front of me, I'm amazed at how much more He'll give to me just once I start. it can be an incredibly simple thing. Do you want to share? It can be an incredibly simple thing, but it can be so powerful. Bring her up, I'll hold her. But it can be so powerful for the people that it's intended to. Share about Sean and your own story?
Oh, I'll just do my own story. Okay, yeah, cool. Quicker. I was saying to Steve when he was telling me is what he wanted to talk about. I was like, I told him an example. I just think it's important for you to know not to discount the simple words or dismiss something as, they already know that. So I was having not my finest parenting moment. This was maybe a year ago. And I was a bit stressed. Steve wasn't there. I was trying to get kids out the door on time. There was lots of yelling. Pretty sure I swore. And I'm driving to work and feeling pretty low and not loving, when you just feel bad about, the way that you behaved. I was feeling really low and not feeling like the best mum. And I got this text message from Rosie, and it said, "Oh, Kirst, I just felt like God wanted me to tell you." It just came out of the blue. God wanted me to tell you what an awesome mama you are. And I love that because it was God knew exactly what I was thinking, and He deposited that into somebody else for them to share with me. And I don't actually think I was in a place to have heard that from God myself because of the way that I was feeling about myself. And I just wanted to encourage you that it can be really simple. And I think, if Rosie had thought about it, and this is what Steve talking about filters, if Rosie had thought, oh, Kirsty knows that, she's a good mum, Kirsty knows that. It's easy to dismiss something, but that was exactly what I needed to hear in that moment.
Thank you. So I am saying to you today that even those times that somebody just drops into your spirit and you pray for them, that's a prophetic insight from the Lord. So I just want to encourage you, something real practical you can do this week is if you're praying for somebody or you feel like somebody drops into your spirit, just shoot them a little text. Tell them exactly how the Father sees them. Or you may have a little word for them or whatever. I don't really know. But just be faithful with what you get given and allow Him to make it grow. So in the States, you can come up. I'm going to tell one more story. In the States, my brother and his family, they had three kids at the time. They'd travelled from, they'd come over. They were having these encounters with the Lord and they really wanted more. And I was like, great. God's going to give them a prophetic word that's going to change the course of their life. It's going to be amazing. And I was really expectant for it. They came over. We took them to church on the one Sunday they were there. And the ministry team comes up and I'd worded them up. I said, hey, my family's coming today. I need you guys to pray for them, get a great prophetic word for them, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, oh, man. We're standing there in this little circle with all these guys praying and they got nothing. I'm like, God, come on. They have come thousands of miles away to hear from you and nothing. And this one young guy just goes, I just get the word broccoli for you. I was fuming. I was deeply upset because I knew what the prophetic had done for me, right? But I was deeply upset that God wouldn't do it for them and that was it, broccoli. We get in the car. I was still fuming. I'm sure some of you have heard me tell this story. We get in the car. We had Harry and Josiah and Eva. We had them all at the time, yeah. Anyway, Josiah was about 6 years old at the time, and I was like, broccoli? What kind of a word is broccoli? And this little voice deep in the back in the van goes, I know what that means. And he just went for like over a minute, telling us he just got the interpretation from the Lord for this word broccoli. He was 6 years old. He had no idea what he was doing. It was crazy. And Kirsty and I just sitting there in the front just going, what the heck? So I said, hey, bud, could you say that again? I snuck my phone out and hit record. And I got him to say it again. And then when we got home, I gave them the word of the interpretation. So this dude at church, he'd just been really faithful. All he got from the Father was the word broccoli. He gave the word broccoli. Right? The interpretation always belongs to the Lord, not to us. So I just take all the pressure off you having to need to know what the word means. This guy's brilliant at that. He'll often just give a word and just go, I've got no idea what this means, and he just gives it. I'm a pastor. I want to see it more explained than that. But anyway, Josiah gives the interpretation of broccoli, and it was an incredible word. So all I just want to say to you is you take what you hear, you give it faithfully, and you trust it to the Lord.
I just thought it might be fun. I don't know if people feel comfortable with this, but obviously with Kirsty talking about Rosie gave you something, I thought I'd just give 2 quick little stories just like you have, and then if other people feel comfortable talking about a word that someone's given them. So I've just got 2 real quick ones. Over the last 4 or 5 years, I've had some financial hardship, and then it turned around. It was going good, but I always lived with this fear that would it return back to hard times again. And one day Steve wrote this down when I still got it in my phone. I'd read it probably once a week, and it just said something like, God set me up at a table and there's all this food and I've eaten lots, but I'm starting to feel guilty about eating any more because I don't want to get fat and uncomfortable and stuff. And your word was don't feel bad about enjoying the goodness of God or something like that. And that's good because I do feel a bit funny sometimes about, am I going to return to the bad days? So that's a little pinpoint thing that's really helpful for me. And another one that I'll just quickly share, Melissa sent this to me about a year ago. In our backyard, we had all these weeds growing up through the turf, and I got some Roundup and I put it on a cloth or something, and the weeds were higher than all the rest of the grass, and I was just putting Roundup on all the higher weeds, and then they died obviously, so the grass looked a bit poor for a while because there was all these patches everywhere of just dead stuff. And Melissa sent me a text one day and it described that perfectly, that she said, there's been things in your life that have grown amongst the good things, there's bad things that have grown amongst it, but they're dead now, and the good grass will grow through the bare patches. And I remember when you sent that to me, you said, I have no idea what this means, like it's just a stupid picture. And I was like, actually 2 weeks ago I poisoned and now it's real for me. So I just wondered if there was other people that wanted to talk about kind of what Kirsty has said and kind of what I've said about times when someone else here, and Glennis is amazing, I can testify to Glennis as well. I reckon every second day I get something from Glennis and it's always from God. I could give you stories after stories of times where Glennis has definitely heard from God and it's been amazing for me. But Melissa, maybe, do you have something that you want to share?
It's not my fault. My time finished 10 minutes ago. I planned for it.
I can't remember exactly, but I think it was Tilly actually. I think one of your kids gave me a word, and it was literally to get out from under the blanket. And it was a time where I suppose I had probably a bit of fear of getting up here and speak, and it just gave me that confidence to really to step out and to not cover what God has given me, and and I don't know if I can share something now. We were in the prayer room this morning, and it was amazing. I think I said to Carly, "Oh gosh, let's just stay in here." It was so good. You could just tell the presence of God, and I had a picture of David and Goliath, and David goes to Goliath, and Goliath has all these weapons and everything, but David said he has God. He has God. And the interesting thing that I found in it was that when he did come to the battlefield, his brothers said, "Oh, what are you doing here? Just go back and look after the sheep." And it made me just think that sometimes, the people around us can just think, "What are you doing?" But when God gives us a gift, He's given it to us for a reason, and we have God, and God is so powerful. We can do so much more when we've got God, and I just believe God has given us all different gifts, and probably don't worry about the people around you, what they think, because when God has given it to you, it's more powerful than anything.
I just want to say, it's a great sermon, Steve. How we know it's of the Lord, and God doesn't leave us in the dark. It says in His Word that His Word doesn't return unto Him void. So it accomplishes the thing that it was sent. And many, many years ago, I just remember about children, how God uses children. And Daniel was probably 6 or 7. And I'd been asked in the church to run a group in Footscray, and that was before it was cool. That was the dead end of town. And it was street kids. And I thought, okay, I just felt that was God, and I was a very young Christian and so forth. Anyway, we're driving in the car and Dan's about 6, and it was on that night, and he just put his hand on my knee like that at 6 and said, "Fear not." And I think, who talks like that at 6? Fear not. And when he said that, my anxiety and fear of running that group with the street kids left like that. So it did not return unto him void. And that group went on for about 12 months every week over there. These kids used to come in, sometimes stoned, sometimes drunk, sometimes angry. And quite a number of those young people gave their hearts to the Lord and were baptised and went on, to be full-on Christians, And so I just want to encourage you as well, that those words that God brings, something will happen. They won't just lie dormant. Something will happen if they're of God.
All right, so we'll just do a couple of things just as we finish. This is what I felt like this morning. Just as I was talking to the Lord about, is how do we bring this to something? I thought, as a church, we probably want to be more hungry for the prophetic, both individually, in terms of we want to earnestly desire that gift in and of ourselves, but also as a church, like how great it would be to have our church encouraged, strengthened and built up through the gift of the prophetic. And it's funny that these three ended up coming up this morning, because these are the three who have obviously been given this gift and have practiced it and worked through it for quite a while. So I thought we're going to do two things. As a church, we'll pray and lay hands on these guys and thank them for the gift that we can recognise in them, right, in terms of the prophetic. And then secondly, you guys who carry it, we'll get you guys to pray for us as a congregation, that gift will be released over us individually, but then also as an entire congregation too.